Hello there guys, what is going on? Son of Chelsea back here again for another edition of Let's Talk Chelsea. Hope you're doing well and keeping safe on this Tuesday. Yesterday was all about the takeover. Today we're back into transfer rumours and all of that good stuff. Quite a bit to get through once again. It could have massive repercussions on Chelsea's summer basically as the Hyperbole regime begins. But before we get into any of that good stuff, make sure to hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell, also hit the like button because it really helps the videos out. And thank you guys once again for all of your support, getting us past 26k towards 27 hopefully before the season starts. That'd be a wonderful thing to hit, and hopefully going to have some really exciting news to bring you over the summer because it seems like it's going to be very busy, as proven today with a lot of stories. Let's start with Lukaku. There have been stories today about a potential return over the summer to Inter Milan. Firstly reported here for Fabrizio Romano and then via Jacob Steinberg in The Guardian. Inter to hold talks over a possible return for Lukaku from Chelsea. Inter are due to hold talks with Lukaku's lawyer on Tuesday to explore a possible return to the club for the striker. Lukaku enjoyed a difficult first season back at Chelsea and apparently wants to go back to Serie A where he succeeded under Antonio Conte, but a deal would be complicated given the fact that Chelsea paid 97 million last August. Inter have not held talks with Chelsea regarding a formula that could lead to a transfer, with a loan the only realistic possibility from the Italian club's perspective. Lukaku's representatives intend to speak to Chelsea soon to understand how they view his future. Nazar Kinsella from Goal also reporting that talks have centred around Lukaku taking a 40% pay cut, with Chelsea likely to ask for a loan fee of around 12 million euros, which could prove problematic. So this feels like it's a long, I think, shot for Lukaku to be permanently sold. I think that's kind of highly unlikely given the finances involved. Whether a loan could be worked out, it's a big thing. It's a big step. Chelsea taking a financial hit guaranteed to, and then the repercussions on how does that impact Chelsea's summer business? How much are Chelsea still having to pay regarding Lukaku, if they are at all? And then what does that open up doors elsewhere in the transfer window potentially for Chelsea to sign a striker? We've seen links to the likes of Jonathan David and Nkunku and other attackers in recent weeks. But in the case of Lukaku, I've written an article for Football London today. Please go and read it. Kind of breaking down why, if Lukaku was to move on, it doesn't instantly solve Chelsea's attacking problems. Not only because of you'd have to probably sign someone, but just generally I think Tuchel's system, the lack of goals we have in that current setup, even when Lukaku wasn't present this season, Chelsea still suffered, and the lack of productivity from players, the poor finishing, the lack of chances, high quality chances being created. So please go and read that, extensive thoughts. But Lukaku's such a big issue to, I think, solve, and you'd hope in the coming days there's going to be obviously a meeting between Lukaku and the club. Seeing some reports that apparently Tuchel and the club would want to keep Lukaku around. I still, and this is purely bias regarding Lukaku and liking him as a player and wanting to see this move work out in some shape or fashion, if that's even possible. Seeing him in a full pre-season, which he didn't get at Chelsea last year, especially with the likes of Ben Chilwell, Reece James, Mason Mount, and potentially other players that could come in by the time we get to pre-season. So let's see what happens. I think it's quite interesting. This news has dropped very quickly after the takeover has been completed, and very much it's the case of whether Inter, I think, would be willing to pay that much for Lukaku on a loan, and whether they're financially in the situation to do it, and you know, if Chelsea unlikely to budge, I think, significantly given the prices and money involved with the Lukaku deal. In terms of attacking additions, I'm going to keep on pushing this. Ousmane Dembele, a tweet here from Nick Purwell about how Ousmane Dembele is understood to have delayed his decision on his future in part until the Chelsea FC sale was complete. The out-of-contract Barcelona forward has interest from PSG and Bayern, among others. Chelsea could move closer into that mix too if they need a forward. Expected Chelsea here tweeted after about sort of Dembele's stats, and I spoke about this last week on the channel. Some really revealing and eye-opening stats, considering he only played 21 league games for Barcelona last year. I absolutely understand the concern over his fitness, the same concern I had back in January. Would that be re-aggravated in the future? But given Given the prices and some of the fees that are being touted for some attackers this summer, the fact that Dembele is on a free, absolutely going to be high wages for a player of his original price, but on a free, the relationship with Tuchel, the type of characteristics he has within his game, and what Chelsea lack in a wide area. More and more, the more I look at this, the more I look into Dembele's recent numbers and just the pros and cons of this deal. I think it's more weighted in the pros at the moment, especially when I'm comparing him to other targets Chelsea could go for this summer. So again, we have to wait and see if that is accurate, that Dembele has waited around. Chelsea are back in the game now. They are officially back in the game with the sanctions being lifted yesterday. I do want to briefly touch on Koulibaly. There was an Instagram post that went out today that Thiago Silva liked about Chelsea reportedly holding positive talks with Koulibaly's agent, and he is keen to moving to the Premier League. This is from Simon Phillips from Cyan Dan, a friend of the channel, and it is believed that Koulibaly will be available for around 30 million this summer from Napoli. Firstly, again, another thing I tweeted when I was asking for sort of responses that I'll get to in a minute regarding Koulibaly. I find it very Chelsea to buy this player 6 or 7 years after we were first strongly linked with him. I remember the Conte first summer, Koulibaly was really heavily linked to Chelsea as a centre-back. I feel in the end that summer we got David Luiz and we won the league, but he has been a player, obviously, every summer it feels like he's linked to the big clubs in England and nothing's ever materialised. But you consider, as I'll get to with some of the responses, maybe with some of the other targets that are kind of, you look at maybe more suitable or long-term additions like Vardial. We've spoken about Gleason Bremer, who's a little bit older from Torino, who looks like he could be going to Inter Milan actually, and other names. There have been Pau Torres. All of these names have been mentioned, the 8-man shortlist, and whether Koulibaly is one of those. But given his age, his experience, connection to Edouard Mendy, obviously his sense of leadership, what you have to take into consideration, it's maybe something we don't a lot, is having a balance within your squad. Chelsea are losing some senior players this summer. They're guaranteed to, particularly with Antonio Rudiger. Not quite sure on Cesar Azpilicueta, but if he left, despite maybe his frailties in his game, that's one of the most experienced Chelsea players, mature Chelsea players who's worn the captain's armband for recent years. He's obviously going to have influence in the dressing room and around the club. You're losing a character there. Marcos Alonso, the potential of Jorginho potentially moving on. Big players with a lot of experience. And what you don't want is maybe that sense that we lose all of that sort of leadership and maturity. And particularly in the case of, say, promoting Levi Colwill, if you could have an older, more experienced defender in front of him that he can deputise and still get sufficient minutes next season for his development, like Chalobah has this year, we're kind of battling with either Christensen or Azpilicueta for minutes. That could be better than getting, say, a 20-year-old who's kind of very similar to Colwill, very similar age, and you're kind of concerned about blocking the path. And Koulibaly is still well regarded. So here's some of the responses. I asked people how they feel about him, if they've watched a lot of him this season. I personally haven't, so I can't claim to be an expert. CFC Central here saying, I'd love to get him. Fits the brief perfectly. Vastly experienced, leader in the dressing room, and very reliable, consistent over the years. I don't see many others who could do that job at central centre-back other than perhaps Stefan de Vrij. With 1 year on deal, we should go all in. Football 10 replying here, he is still a very good centre-back. Thiago Silva will not be able to play all games. We need another experienced centre-back in the team. Also has a very good rapport with Mendy. Jessica Frotter, who I've had on a guest on Football London, really good account. Once again, go and follow. We need more experience in our back line. He'd help in terms of leadership, and he'd allow us to integrate Colwill in due time, so it'd be a good deal in my opinion. Other people as well have sort of expressed if apart from, say, Jules Koundé on the other side of the fence, Koulibaly would be their option. And for 30 million for a player of that, you've seen the value that Thiago Silva has brought to Chelsea since he arrived. Just immense leadership, immense maturity, one of the most consistent players, and that's what you'd hope you would get from Koulibaly coming in. I guess the only thing from, say, a Tuchel and Chelsea perspective is if they are looking for someone who specifically plays on the left in terms of a back three, a left-footed player, which you get in Colwill, but maybe, as we've seen, Tuchel apparently a fan of Vardial from RB Leipzig, and other names mentioned too, as I'm sure we'll get closer to Chelsea doing something. There may be that as well, but I'm interested to see how this one develops. It's a case of where Chelsea go this summer. How are they looking to recruit? But you still need that balance. That summer with Frank, Thiago was the oldest signing that year. but he turned out to be one of the best. So just because you sign a player over the age of 30 or close to the end of his career, that does not mean that they are, that's a bad deal. And for 30 million, given some of the numbers we've seen for Koulibaly in recent seasons, it may turn out to be a very shrewd deal in a very important summer for Chelsea, where I think saving money and looking internally at solutions, I think, is obviously very important in the new era under Todd Bowley. The last thing I want to speak about today is Conor Gallagher and a piece from my colleague at Football London, Bobby Vincent. Thomas Tuchel's stance on Conor Gallagher's future as key Chelsea meeting revealed. Thomas Tuchel has confirmed to Conor Gallagher that he will not be a bit part player at Chelsea next season. Football.London understands. The England international is expected to stay and fight for his place at the Blues next season after a successful loan spell at Crystal Palace. The 22-year-old midfielder recorded 11 direct goal contributions, 8 goals and 3 assists in the 21-22 Premier League season with the Eagles. Palace want to keep Gallagher for at least another campaign, with Patrick Vieira making no secret of the club's desire to keep a hold of the talented Chelsea midfielder. Gallagher is one of the names that has to be brought back and has to be implemented into the first team squad, and he's the one I'm most confident Chelsea and Tuchel will give a chance to, not only because of his progression this year at Premier League level, I think it's undeniable, but also the way Tuchel speaks about him. Any time across the last 9 months when Tuchel has been asked about Gallagher and his development, whether it was when he was called up for England, I specifically remember when he got the call up in like October, November time, he was so complimentary about Gallagher in terms of his work rate, the type of player he liked playing alongside. I think it bodes well, and the characteristics of and the attributes within Gallagher's game just suit Tuchel's Chelsea so well. I'm already thinking about next season and having Mount and Gallagher starting games together, or maybe you have a situation at 60 minutes where if the intensity, Tuchel spoke across the season about wanting to keep intensity and maintain intensity, something that Chelsea have struggled to do. If you have with the 5 sub rule now as well, you bring on Gallagher and you've still got Mount on the pitch, or one replaces the other, or we've got other attackers, maybe like in a dream scenario Dembele, that you can bring on too. I just think it gives the team more energy as well. The threat in front of goal, as we've seen Gallagher develop as an attacking midfielder. The role he played at Crystal Palace in a midfield 3 isn't really there for him at Chelsea this season, but if Tuchel wants to change formation, which I think I'd like to feel he's open to doing with a 4-3-3 or another variation of that, I think as an attacking midfielder, that's something that has frustrated me over the season when people from a distance have looked at Gallagher and they've kind of mixed him in with like defensive midfielders when that's not what he does, and I don't think that's what Tuchel will see him as. I'm not saying he couldn't play in a double six. Ruben's played in the double six this year, and I think Gallagher played in the double six at pre-season last year, but I look at him as one of those maybe 10s if we're playing our current formation behind the striker, or if we were to change, I think I see him as more in the batch with Werner, Pulisic, Ziyech, Mount, those type of players in the squad, Hudson-Odoi. That's, I think, where he'll mostly be competing, and I think that's a good thing given the really beneficial season and loan he had at Crystal Palace. Let me know your opinions about Gallagher, because I think he is the standout loanee last year. I think it's pretty undeniable, and I'm just so excited to see what he can do, and I think that Chelsea know from last year there's going to be interesting Gallagher, but they've got to resist it. They've got to bring him in, because right there, like we've seen with other academy talent, Chelsea could be saving themselves a lot of money with an internal solution. So let me know your thoughts on Gallagher in the comments below. But that is it for this edition of Let's Talk Chelsea. Thank you guys so much for taking the time to watch it. If you did enjoy it, hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so you don't miss any of the uploads on the channel. Have a great evening, and I'll see you again very soon. All the best.